Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Anton, and our guest today is Frederick Marx. And the reason why I wanted to bring you onto the podcast today, Frederick, is it's actually went in two phases. So originally, when I reached out to you, it was very much, I had watched Hoop Dreams, I had watched some of your films, and I was very much, I think like a lot of people that invite someone onto a podcast or an interview, it was really all to do with your accomplishments. All Frederick was to me was an accomplishment, all the things you've achieved. And when we had that meeting last week, I've actually been thinking about some of our conversation every day for the last few days. Some of the things we talked about and just some of the things that happened, because that was, as I told you, a very oddly meaningful and therapeutic conversation that I wasn't expecting. I went in there just expecting to, I don't know, talk about what we could do on a podcast, talk about a possible narrative angle, and it really became very emotional, literally to the point where, as you remember, I teared up quite a bit at one point, and I think I really realized that so many people hide behind their accomplishments and they build up this persona and this facade of all of the things they've done and what people expect of them, so that they don't have to be themselves, because that who they really are is the traumatized kid and early in life. And I remember, checking out one of your talks at Google, and I remember telling you this, that I was wondering, okay, is Frederick Marx off camera and on camera the same person, or am I going to meet Frederick and he's just going to be a guy, just like anyone else that's done some cool things? And immediately within 5 minutes of talking to you, just your warmth, your presence, the way that you just dove into me, like literally within 5 minutes of knowing you and talking to you, I shared with you something and you just went, this is what I see in you. And I think that you're a remarkable young man at 27. And then the things that you shared, and I'm not going to repeat them now, just in case, that will be up to you if you want to share that in the future.
Well, actually, I'd love to. I think that's a great place to begin. I do see you as an exceptional man. And what I was asking you was, I get it that you're mentoring others, but who's mentoring you? And that's something that for me is just fundamental to the well-being, not only of our individual lives, but it's part of the web that connects us as society. And so I just want to see you flourish and thrive. And so I want to see you have a number of powerful men stand behind you and say, yeah, I've got my eye on this guy, Anton, and I am looking out for his success, because the world needs you, just like it needs all of us. But, it's just you and me here. Well, I know you got others, but I mean, for the purposes of this conversation. And so, I want to see you achieve your greatest potential as a human being in this lifetime. So that's important to me. And I'm invested in that, in a sense, with everybody that I meet. But I don't see, frankly, quite the same potential that I do with everybody that I meet. So.
Thank you, Frederick. I sincerely appreciate that. And, as we talked about before, I never really had a father figure in my life, and your father died when you were 9. And, from what I've read in your book, it seemed like he was I'm sure he was a good man and he had very good intentions, but in many ways it seemed like he was a very broken man from that, call it toxic masculinity, just that era of men not being able to show their emotions, and how much I've seen firsthand how much that hurts us. Like, man, having a father that doesn't see and value your emotions and your sensitivity, especially as someone as sensitive and emotional as myself. And yeah, reading your book, what seems to be as sensitive and emotional as you, it's like we live in a culture that says that men have to be masculine. And obviously that's a generalization, but essentially it's like we live in a culture that says men should not feel emotion. should not be vulnerable, should not be sensitive. If you are hurt by anything, it means that you're weak. It means that your value as a male, as a man in society is diminished. You were taught that to show vulnerability and emotion, women will find us repulsive, that we won't be like someone else, some more masculine man will come in and steal what we have. And then we have a father figure potentially, or a mother figure, that drives that again. So you're being told this message from society. You're being told this message from the person that has brought you into the world, other than your mother, of course, but, you know, been around you and taught you a lot of the time what you're supposed to know about being a man. And it's like, if that is all you know, and that was burned into me, like, constantly. And it's like, it's been such an uphill battle, literally fumbling around in the dark, trying to figure out who I am, who is Anton Czachor, because all we're given is the version of me I'm supposed to be from my father, the version of me I'm supposed to be from society, the version of me I'm told from entertainment, from all the movies, TV shows, and books. Like, there is there is pretty much two archetypes, it seems like, in most film and entertainment, is the super masculine and the super feminine. You have the very sensitive, not overly emotional, but extremely sensitive man, and extremely masculine. And I think you and I are alike in this, that we are somewhere more in the middle. We have these, as we talked about before we started rolling, you have ambitions. You want to be a Hollywood director. You want to be up in the upper echelon and create these cinematic masterpieces, these cinematic works of art with these big budgets and actors that inspire you, actors that can turn these characters into human beings. So you have that ambition, and you also have a sensitive, soft side of you. And I think that it is very difficult to try to believe in yourself when no one else does. You know what I mean?
Oh, well, totally. Well, there's probably about four things you said in there that I'd like to circle back to and address. But one of them, I mean, just what you said about cobbling together an image of workable, mature masculinity is exactly what, in many ways, my life journey is about. And that's also reflected in the books. But I did the exact same thing you did, you know, trying to cull from here, there, and everywhere, including Hollywood movies, little pieces that I could adopt and go, well, that's something that both rings true and that I can respect about what the mature masculine looks like. But it really, you know, let's face it, we don't have these models, at least very widely recognized in society. They are out there, but they're under the radar of dominant culture. And so that's why mentorship is so important. That is why it's fundamental. We have to have those models of mature masculinity in close proximity to our own lives that we can draw from and get inspiration from and guidance from and wisdom from. So that's been fundamental for me, at least since I turned 40 in my life. Mm-hmm. Before then, I didn't have that, and so it was cobbled together. But another thing I wanted to touch on too, about blessing and acknowledgement. You know, Robert Bly put it so beautifully. He said, American men, and by extension, I'm going to take license and include Canadian men, are the walking wounded, unconsciously seeking their father's blessing.
Yeah.
And I think that is so fundamentally true. And that is one of the pillars of the men's work that I've been doing now for 27 years. We're learning how to father ourselves and each other. And part of that is blessing the hell out of each other, seeing goodness, seeing brilliance, seeing wisdom, seeing, and then blessing it, calling it out, naming it, blessing it. Because especially as men, we need that from other men, older men typically, because we did not get that from our fathers. We did not get that from our uncles. We did not get that from our communities. So that's a fundamental, deep need in most men.
Mm. And I remember another thing you mentioned when we met the first time is like you openly asked me, you're like, what mentors do you have in your life? And I said, none. I don't have any mentors. I don't belong to any groups. I'm starved of community. I feel lonely quite regularly, not from the fact that I need people, but there's a certain physiological need I have, as all human beings do, to be social.
Of course you need people. We all need people. Human beings are designed to live in community. That's the nature of our DNA.
Absolutely. And this is a thing too, though, is that when you asked me that and you said you need to find community, it was super confronting to me because I have these two ideas, and I don't know if you can relate to this in my head. So I've been told over and over in my life, the only person you can rely on is yourself. And if you need somebody, you're weak. It's like if you need a mentor, you're weak. Like, why do you need a mentor? Why do you need a group? Why do you need a community? And so I adopted this lone wolf archetype my entire life. Like, if I need anybody, there's something wrong with me. And so, right. You pulling this forward, you inviting me into a community, part of me is longing for that so deeply. Like when you said that, part of me is like, thank you for giving me permission to want this, because I don't feel like I have permission. But go on.
Well, but that's part of the lies that we're handed as men, right there. I call going it alone the male disease, right? It's the male disease because we're all taught that. We're all taught that if you can't just rely on yourself, then there's something fuck up about you, right? That you're incomplete and inadequate as a man. And this is literally killing us, literally, because by not having extended networks of support, by not living in community, and also by extension, not being acquainted with our emotional lives and sharing them with other men and and receiving theirs, we are actually shortening our lifespan. There's no question about it, because all the studies now are in saying that if you don't have EQ, if you don't have emotional awareness, you're going to die at an earlier age. If you don't have close friends and people that you can trust and call on in need, you are going to die at an earlier age. These things are now statistically proven. And it's interesting. Part of the reason why I love working with veterans is because they understand this at almost a cellular level, because it's just drilled into them from boot camp. And when they say something like, "I've got your back," you better believe it, that they will give their life for you, if that's what's called for, right? And that is inspiring as hell to me. That's how community functions, when people care that deeply about each other, that they're willing to give up their own lives for the men and women who stand to their right and left. So that's what we need to sort of reinculcate our culture with. And the way that we get there is, of course, initiation and mentorship.
It is funny that you mentioned that, because as you were speaking, this idea of like, I got your back, like part of me doesn't even believe that's possible. Again, being brought up in this society, how many people did I rely on in high school, university, or just various things in life? And they just, when you need them, they're gone. And I think it's, again, what you said about like, you need the initiation, because both parties need to understand having your back is important. Because we live in a society that no one believes having your back is important, because everyone believes they're supposed to be this lone wolf. So me expecting or wanting someone to have my back, I don't even fully believe. I deserve it. I don't fully believe that anyone would anyway. Like, you can't really trust people because they leave. And the person that you are expecting to have your back also doesn't really believe in having people's back. They don't, and because they don't really believe it's a thing, because our society doesn't propagate it, they don't really have your back because they don't see the value in it. So it's like, I kind of understand what you mean by you need to be initiated. We need to create this new global myth, this cultural myth, where it's important to have each other's backs. It's important to have a tribe, a community, and all these things. Now, a question for you, Frederick, because I know we talked when we met about some of our mental health struggles, suicidal thoughts, this kind of thing. What does your community presently look like? Is this an online community? Is this an in-person? Because you're in San Francisco, if I'm correct.
Well, I'm right across the bay in Oakland. But yeah, well, one of the things I write about, in fact, I have a whole chapter in my Rites to a Good Life book called Community. And I define community existentially, which is to say, who am I in proximity with in the moment? At that moment, they are community, effectively. So when I, for example, officiate a wedding, I say at the beginning, for all intents and purposes, we are community right now. And so I want you to recognize that, and that we all have responsibilities in community to make it function and to make it flourish. So, I have up to 20 different communities, okay? Some of them are, yes, face-to-face communities. Last night, I was sitting around the fire with 9 men I meet weekly with, my men's group. And you better believe that face-to-face and heart-to-heart connection is fundamental to my well-being. I love it. I still smell like smoke, actually, this morning. So that's important to me. But let's face it, we live also in a cyber world, and communities can function and flourish in a cyber context. So that's fine too. So the point is, where do you find common ground with other people? And yes, eventually, hopefully, where can you deepen that common ground to get to the point where you actually have each other's backs in a fundamental way? But the reason that is an essential component product of initiation is because initiation teaches us interdependence. Right. And this is a lesson that is lost in our modern society, right? Nobody teaches us interdependence, right? But the fact of the matter is, because you exist, I exist. And we've lost that notion, in our society. And so we have to have each other's backs. And in fact, we see the product of this now, right? With the collapse, capital C collapse around the world, right? Environmentally and in all these other systems and structures that are collapsing because we don't recognize that the person who walks down the street in front of my house is my brother. And I have to take care of him, in a sense, just as much as he has to take care of me. And if I don't, we all go down. So I hear you loud and clear. I've faced that same issue, that same go it alone shadow, if you want to call it that. And it has many forms for me too. Part of it is I have a perfection shadow too.
Me too.
Where if I don't deliver the perfect goods, that I'm a fuck up and I'm a failure and I'm a loser, right? So, but these are just lies that we tell ourselves. And the fundamental truth is we're all beings deserving of love and connection and light, and we are interdependent.
Amen. Absolutely. And speaking of this idea of collapse, because it definitely seems like economically, environmentally, it seems like Western civilization as we know it will probably not be around very much sooner, in my eyes. I just I
agree.
I'm an optimist in that I think, again, like I'm a very spiritual person. So I believe there's, and not even believe, I've witnessed an awakening, you can call it, in my podcast communities, and just seeing these, Aubrey Marcus and Paul Check, and you've, like, obviously your roommate Ian Morris is a friend of mine and the communities he's part of. And it's like, because as a podcaster, I'm so tapped into these online communities around the world. And I just keep seeing these communities getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and more people, you can call it waking up, but just becoming much more conscious. And if you asked me like 2 years ago, what do I think the future is probably God, like just maybe nuclear Armageddon or just complete ecological collapse. And now I'm optimistic. I'm still realistic, and I know it's not going to be easy, but I haven't written the future off yet. I still think there's the possibility that we can do something, and I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I honestly, it sounds hokey pokey, but like I feel like I'm kind of part of it. I feel like my whole journey in life and what I'm doing with my podcast is I'm very much planning on getting in that Texas podcast circuit and adding my energy to this evolving thing, because I think we have a shot. And the point I'm driving at in all of this is you've done a lot of documentaries looking at various different peoples. And one of them, you looked at the Buddhists in Tibet, if I recall, the journey from
Zanskar.
Have you in your own time or publicly, have you ever talked in depth to African tribes, indigenous tribes, Australian tribes, New Zealand, like any of like these very indigenous peoples, and have you gotten their perspective on what they think the possible future of the world could look like?
That's a great question. And I guess the short answer is no, not really. But every time I find myself in the company of indigenous people, you better believe I try to solicit their viewpoints on all kinds of things. Not only the viability of the future of the planet, but particularly cultural things.
Yeah.
What is it that sustains your culture? Exactly. And underscores your sense of interdependence within your culture, right? So that's typically the kind of stuff that really excites me. But I don't consider myself an optimist or a pessimist. I just consider myself a realist, and I just it's partly due to my Zen training. I recognize that this moment is all that we have right now, and yes, we know the data, we know the forecasts of what's coming and how bad things are, and we can do something in this moment. And that reminds me of what you were saying too about what you're called to do. That's also essential, that each of us finds out what it is that we're uniquely called to do, what our contribution to make is, because for everybody it looks different, and so each of us has to find that and then go out there and do it. And so even though the oceans may rise and the forests may disappear and the planet may well burn up, and frankly, human species may be extinct by the end of this century, as some people are predicting, we can still actually go about our day, paradoxically enough, feeling inspired and feeling even joyful by bringing our gifts to the world, because that's our responsibility to do.
And for yourself, because obviously you've done so much work in the rites of passage area and veterans work and all of these things, What other areas, realms have you thought or would you like to explore in the future with your documentary or fiction work? Have you thought about branching out into different ideas of ways of exploring the possible futures or peoples?
Well, I'm not so sure about possible futures. So, well, yeah. So, are we still on the same subject of collapse and sort of what is to come in the future? Is that part of what
Yeah, 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 because I was getting at like, have you thought about reaching out or doing documentaries on like indigenous peoples and that kind of thing?
Well, yeah. I mean, in a sense, I have, as you mentioned yourself, with Zanskar. In another sense, I have with even Hoop Dreams, which is African American inner city people.
Yeah.
How are they surviving given racism, given classism, given all of these institutional glass ceilings, that they
Mhm.
face, all the isms. But in a sense, my book, Rites to a Good Life, is my compilation thinking on that subject. And the question that I asked myself is, if communities are going to survive through the coming age of collapse, what kind of cultural supports will they need? That's what I
Mm.
tried to make a kind of an encyclopedia of in that book, breaking it down in lots of different ways. And yes, it all comes back to initiation and mentorship, but it can look very, very different for peoples in different parts of the world and for people in different ages in their normal human lifespan, and different cultural practices. So I tried to sort of outline, this is what I think we all are going to need to survive culturally. Now, when it comes, to physical survival, I don't know much about sustainable agriculture, for example. I don't know much about, hydro and electric power, et cetera. All of those things, of course, are going to be fundamental. But I'm just talking about human needs, human relations, and interactions.
Yeah, I definitely think you and I are, as you said, we're all here for our dharma. We're all here to do what we're here to do. And yeah, I'll let Zach Bush focus on the ecological stuff and the regenerative agriculture and all the things he's doing. Because yeah, I believe I'm here for primarily mental health reasons. I think my gift to the world is finding a new framework for understanding and displaying vulnerability. And then your big thing, in some sense, seems to be obviously rites of passage, balanced masculinity, and creating responsible adults and just responsible human beings that take care of each other, take care of the earth. That is definitely, I feel, one of your contributions to society. And let's do some dreaming here. So let's say in three years you and Jeff Bridges become buddies. He brings you into Hollywood. He says, you know what, Frederick, I really like you, man. I'll help you put up some money. And you have a script idea. You say, hey, Jeff, I'd like you to be in the lead role. He's like, dude, I got your back. I have some other friends. They can do this film at a budget. What kind of stories would you like to tell? Have you thought about what you would like to do in fiction?
More than that, I've written 2 feature screenplays that have just been sitting on my shelf for 20 years, basically.
Really? Tell us about those.
Seriously. And every few years, as needed, I sometimes take them off the shelf and tweak them a little bit, but that's basically where they've been. So one of them is a comedy. It was based on a friend of mine's short story, a brilliant Canadian writer who lives in Vancouver by the name of Will Gerda. And his original story was called That's Entertainment. A very short story that I took as a kernel that I built a whole feature comedy script on. And the basic premise is, and he wrote this, I guess, about 1990, maybe. And I picked it up and I wrote the script, the first draft, in 1995. And so this was all before the burgeoning internet, right? And all before even reality television, which is ubiquitous now, right? So the premise, and it's obviously flimsy now in the contemporary times, but this guy ends up destroying all the curtains in his house. He's a real oddball character, and he feels like he's going to do his wife and kids a favor. He's going to wash the curtains. So he takes all the curtains down from this old Victorian house, all these beautiful, and he destroys them in the washing machine. Because I found that out. You destroy curtains when you wash them in a washing machine. So that becomes the premise. And then there's this big high rise going up next door. All these lonely yuppies are out on their balconies sipping their martinis alone every night and looking at his family. And they can see into the windows and hear the kids playing and see the family fighting and everything. And they are drawn, right, to this family drama that's real life unfolding before their eyes. So gets the idea he's going to make a living. He goes door to door and gets subscriptions. So he gets people to pay a monthly fee to basically sign up and watch his family.
Wow.
So pretty soon he's rolling in money. Anyway, I'm going into far more detail than you want to hear on this story, but it gets crazier and crazier and crazier because the people then start coming into the house, and his wife doesn't know about it. The kids don't know about it, but one figures it out, starts blackmailing him. Anyway, so that's that story. The other one could not be possibly any more different. And it's based on my own family history, and it's set in 1950s Philadelphia. So it's a period piece about the McCarthy period. So this anti-communist hysteria that went on in the United States at that time, and it's basically a look inside that big bugaboo that everybody's been afraid of in the United States to even take a close look at for over 50 years. What does an American communist family even look like? And so that's what this is. It's a story. It's based on my own life and my family's life. And it's about, an all-American communist family, which sounds like a contradiction in terms, but they were everywhere. Especially in the 30s and 40s, but into the 50s, 60s as well. So it has a lot of parallels to today's environment where it's dangerous for people to speak certain political truths.
Yeah.
Because you can get shot down for it, literally sometimes, but certainly figuratively. And so it's this whole era of repressive political climate that I'm focused on. And how does a young boy kind of grow up in that environment? And how does he come of age given those realities? So that's what that's about.
Yeah, that's powerful, because I think politics is so divisive, and the moment you say, oh, I'm a socialist, I'm a communist, I'm a capitalist, it's like people, they don't listen to you anymore. They project what their thoughts on that thing is, and they say, oh, you believe this? It's like, well, hold on. You haven't even asked me how I interpret communism, And I think that's such a big thing that I'm learning is, I don't know if I told you this, but a big theme of my life that I'm walking into, that I'm choosing to take on, is this idea of courage in the face of controversy. I've realized that I had censored myself a lot up until this point. I had kept a lot of my political beliefs to myself, and I don't expect anyone to state their political beliefs. That's everyone's decision. But for me, I kind of have a feeling of where I think my life is going. And I feel like that is to play a bigger role in the conversations of society, and not being the person who tells people what to do. But I think one of my roles could be the person who outlines the possibilities for people to choose for themselves. Because I think one gift I do have is I'm very calm. I'm very rational when I look through things. I'm not very emotional about it. And I can see both sides. Like, I'm not a communist, I'm not a socialist, I'm not a capitalist. Like many things, I think there's good things to everything. And one thing I'd love to do in the future on my podcast and in the content I make is look at all of these things, the benefits, the problems with all of them in a way that is not scary for people, in a way that doesn't do, I want to do my best not to trigger people and to really go like, when someone says they believe something, do you attack them before they even are able to talk about what that belief even is? Because I think a lot of the time we get so caught up in ideologies, in the words of things and the symbols of things, we actually rarely know what anyone is talking about at all. Because really, to actually know what someone truly believes, you'd have to have a podcast, a 2-hour conversation of like, oh, what does that mean for you? And this is all to say, I think one of the gifts of fiction, one of the gifts of entertainment is you can explore the reality of something in a safe container. Like you making a movie about a communist family, you don't have to say you agree with it. You don't have to say you disagree with it. You can just say, this is one way that this could play out. You could literally even make 2 movies about a communist family, and they both have very different endings. One family burns up and it goes terribly. The other one, they find a way to survive. And I think that I would like to see more of that. Because as you said, as we talked about before the podcast started rolling about Hollywood, it seems like Hollywood has chased big budget blockbusters, like the 30th Star Wars movie, the 50th Marvel Avengers movie. And, as you said, I absolutely agree. I'm always searching for entertainment that I call it the trifecta. It's like good characters. For me, I'm a romantic, so I usually like a romantic subplot, and then something that has intellectual stimulation. That's really important for me. I don't want to learn, even when it comes to anything, my main priority right now in my life is actually not to learn things, but to connect with things. Like when I read your book, Rites to a Good Life, I don't go into that going, oh, I want to learn new things. I want to connect with Frederick. I want to see Frederick's point of view, because I'm at a point right now where I'm actually trying to let go of a lot of my beliefs that I've taken from people, that I've learned, information I've gathered, and I'm trying to take that away and assimilate it into what I actually believe. And so when I listen to like podcasts all the time now, I don't listen to Aubrey Marcus because I want to learn something. I view everything I consume, everything I witness and look into as a friendship, as a relationship. I'm having a relationship with your book, Rites of a Good Life. I'm literally I'm feeling it. I'm feeling all the stories, all the interviews, Michael Meade, you, and I'm connecting with you through your words. And so again, this is a long way of saying, I think it could be very cool to make these movies that in a safe container explore things that we don't usually talk about in our society,
Yeah. Well, you prompted a couple thoughts for me. One of them, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong about trying to have a political discussion with anybody these days. What I do think makes it extremely dangerous is the question is when? When do you have that political discussion? So for me, what's fundamental is to put it at the, let it be the 10th or 15th conversation that you have. Because what we need to do, because we are such a polarized society, is rebuild bridges back to each other as human beings across differences. And the way that we do that is by focusing on other conversations. So when you meet somebody and you ask how their kids are doing, how's your spouse, what's happening with your job. We all have those same concerns, right? So it's easy to build bonds across those differences very quickly. And so if you just suspend having a political conversation till after you've established, oh my God, yeah, we both love the New York Jets, and thank God that they're doing great this year. And, how's your kid doing? Did he get over his COVID and all of that? We've got some real history and some real depth of relationship. And then we can weed into, oh, wow, you're a Democrat? Oh, that's interesting. I'm a Republican. Well, let's, and then so it doesn't mean that we're fighting right away, right? So that's one thought. The other, and it relates to this, a lot of my work is about putting myself in other people's shoes and seeing the world from their point of view. Really, if you look at all my documentaries, that's in a sense exactly what I'm doing. I'm just trying to get inside the skin of the people that I'm filming and seeing out from their skin to see the world as they see it. And so for me, that's actually very exciting. I love doing that. And I love then telling stories that also put audiences inside those skins so that people can experience something that might be very, very different from their own daily experience, but then suddenly have empathy and appreciation for that difference, for those people of difference. One other last thing related, I'll say, when I was filming in Colorado Springs, I was filming a Christian rite of passage for teenage boys. And I'm not a Christian, and yet, I love Craig Glass, the man that I was working with and is still a friend to this day, who's a devout Christian man who is doing beautiful work, initiating and mentoring boys. And he uses the example of Jesus Christ as his life of mature masculinity. And it's a beautiful example. There's so many lessons there that are so rich. So I found myself in the home of one of the prospective parents that I wanted to film for this rite of passage with these boys. And we're watching the news, or the news is on in the room, and there's trouble in the Middle East. And at one point he goes, I just think we should kill them all. And I said, well, I'm sorry, who should we kill? The Muslims, man, we just need to fucking kill them all. I'm like, oh, okay. So I didn't say anything, right? And, part of me feels to this day like a coward, like I should have said something like, at the very least, like, well, that might not be productive, or it might not be helpful. But I didn't say anything. And that was because I was focused, my eyes were on the prize. And the prize is initiating boys. And I certainly wanted to see his son come into the container with Craig Glass and these other boys and get all the benefits of initiation and mentorship that he could get. So that was part of it. I didn't want to blow up that opportunity. But I also recognized that he and I have commonalities. And just like me, he wants his son to grow into the best man that he can be. And so I chose to focus on that in that moment, and to not get caught in some kind of political or other discussion about are Muslims good or bad or whatever. Yeah. So, that's what I wanted to share.
Yeah, and even like that's a very interesting thing too, because I feel like we live in a society right now where if the average person, if they heard what you just said, they'd be like, oh, that person's a monster. He's a bigot. He's a right-wing Republican. How dare he say such a terrible thing? And yet, if you talk to him, I'm guessing, just by the basis of what you just said about how you had a lot of other things in common with him, and that this was actually shocking, and the fact that it was shocking means that he was a decent human being in probably a lot of other areas, and this was something that seemed out of character for him. And that's what I find interesting is that, yeah, that might have been out of character. And I think we all have these things. I'm guessing you have something that, you know, if we talked for 30 hours, you'd probably say something that I would go, oh man, that seems out of character for Frederick. Same thing with me. You know, I probably have this shadow that, you know, after talking with me a lot, you're like, that doesn't really seem like Anton. You know, because I might say like, oh, you know, I don't like this. I think we need to fix this problem this way. And I think we all have these things. And what it really comes down to, I think, is the simple fact that we're afraid of something. We've gotten information that has stated the solution to what we fear. So, for example, this guy, you know, he's been sold this idea that all Muslims are these terrorists, suicide bombers, all these things. And again, like, that makes sense. If you are terrified of something, mm-hmm. and someone has told you this is why this is a bad thing, this is the solution to it, and this is the problem for the thing you fear, it would make sense that you believe that. And I think that we all have versions of that. I think that politics is one of the biggest versions of that. Is, okay, I feel there's a problem in the world, and then I tune into Fox News, and Fox News says the problem is the liberals or the Democrats. I tune into CNN and they say, oh, yeah, we agree. There is a problem in the world, and actually, it's the Republicans. So it's like we're all pitted against each other because we have this feeling of initial fear, just an emotion, it's almost like our reptilian brain, our instincts are saying there's something wrong going on, and then we plug into something, and it tells us that it reaffirms the same feeling we have, and then it tells us the reason.
Right.
Why that's the problem. And everyone is telling you a different reason. Oh, the reason's because of this. The reason's because of that. The reason's because of ecological disaster. All these things. And so I think a big part of what I'm realizing is I think a potential solution to a lot of this is essentially everything we're always talking about is just being more vulnerable, being more self-reflective, and going like...
Turn off your TV.
Dude, well, I don't watch the news at all. I stopped watching the news years ago, man. Like, I have that idea, like, if I really need to know something, someone's going to tell me, you know? Yep.
And you can read in-depth articles too, whenever you have the time. That's what I do. But yeah, it's fundamental that we unplug, from the fear mongering that is going on. That is really how most broadcast media make their money.
Yeah.
They make their money by inciting fear in their audience and making people so afraid that they think that if they don't keep watching, they're going to miss out, that something essential is going to happen that they'll not know about. When in fact, all it's doing is not only inducing more fear, but you're exactly right. It's focusing their fear on people who may not deserve it. Scapegoats. And that's where all the isms are born too, right? It's those people, that group, and all the finger pointing. And the fact that politicians also engage in this same modality of invoking fear, and then they always present themselves as, and I'm going to be the guy that's going to take care of all those fears for you.
Exactly.
So vote for me. Well, I'm sorry. First of all, I don't believe that those fears are necessarily real. And secondly, I already hate you, and I'm not going to vote for you because you're inducing fear in people, right? So anyway, that's my thoughts on the subject.
No, I absolutely I agree with you. And it's like, this is one reason why I'm at a stage in my life where I'm catching the travel bug again. Like back in 2018, I had a really big shift in my life. I dropped out of university actually, before I finished, just in a state of despair. Like I realized that the whole future I had planned for myself, I no longer resonated with. And so I traveled. I went to New Zealand, traveled British Columbia, just to see the world. And that was so eye-opening. Just to like not have a home and to truly move around, meet new people all the time, go on adventures, go on hikes, climb up mountains, be in nature. And it's so interesting how when you are in that state of constant flux, you don't get so focused into politics and all of these issues. It's very interesting. You just kind of like live your life because you're like, I don't need to know all these things because I don't live here, or I'm not going to be here for very long, or I don't even have a stake or a root in this place. And I'm like, I'm right now excited to go and travel to different cultures. And like I'm really craving just unplugging. In some sense, the opposite of what I'm doing right now. Like as a podcaster, I'm always plugged into things. I'm always getting people's opinions on things. I'm talking to you. I'm assimilating Frederick's point of view. I'm in a conversation, a dialogue with you in the world all the time. And it's like I'm realizing that I'm craving. I want to almost like embed into my life a sense of balance, a sense of ebb and flow, a sense of output and then hibernation and reset. Because I don't know if it's healthy to only output and input without that time. Like, I think you almost need to, that old adage of go into a cave. Like, literally, like, don't just meditate in your house because your house is, by the very nature of being in your house, you're still plugged into everything. You have a stake in the world because you live in it. And it's almost like leaving to go into just a cave. You almost, in some sense, you get to like emotionally and energetically detach from existence because you go into a place where you have no stake into anything. You know what I mean?
Totally. No, I think it's actually very healthy. You know, I consider myself an ambivert, okay? I decided, I was living for 13 years with my late wife, who was very much an introvert. And she actually taught me a lot about introversion and some of the benefits and value of that, if you will, going into the cave. She was never happier than when she was sitting in bed reading a book,
Yeah, I love that.
So I really grew to appreciate my introvert side. So I think everybody basically, well, and I'll also say that if I don't have like at least one 7-day meditation retreat every year, I can get a little wonky.
Wow.
Yeah, I need to unplug. I need to go inside and sit in silence, return to the silence. That is so nourishing and healing, I think, not only for me, frankly, for most people. So I do at least one 7-day meditation retreat every year. And I think it's essential that everybody find their own balance between extrovert and introvert. And when they need to go back inside, withdraw, shut off the world, and go inside, because as Buddhism tells us, basically every answer we're looking for is in there. We just have to shut up and sit down and for a long enough period of time, and the universe will open to us. But most people don't have the patience or the willingness to do that. So everybody needs to find that balance for them.
Yeah. Well, I've even contemplated, I don't know if the word struggle is the right word. I think contemplated. I've contemplated my entire existence as a podcaster before for that exact reason. Because my base understanding, like, I'm friends with psychics and stuff, right? People that are very tapped in. And so I'm part of that world where most of their knowledge comes from like channels with source, the universe, you can call it. They'll just get downloads. And then it's kind of like, it's almost been like an ego death at times for me. Because I go, like, the very nature of what I do.
It should be if it's productive.
Yeah, it's like the very nature of what I do in a sense, Frederick, is like share my opinion with other people, my guests, and in turn share a opinion with the audience. And in some sense, I'm still learning why do I exist? Because if the true nature of truth comes internally, that we all have a truth and we all have a connection with source, what is the role of a podcaster? You know what I mean?
Well, I wouldn't say we have a truth, because that intimates something fundamental and unchanging. Okay. And I would argue that nothing is unchanging, right? Everything changes. And beliefs are one of the most pernicious things that exist out there.
Yeah.
And that we have to hold whatever. I mean, theoretically, as a Zen practitioner, I don't hold any beliefs. All I do is I see what comes each moment. What's reality now? What's reality now? What's reality now? That's all that I sort of use as my reference. So I try not to build belief systems or superstructures, because it can get dangerous. So I wanted to say something else about that. It'll come back to me. Yeah.
Yeah, give it time. It'll come.
Yeah. I think that's really key to a wholesome life, is to hold our beliefs, our ideologies extremely lightly, if we can't dispense with them altogether, and recognize that there is no eternal self, right? That this ego that we construct because we need it to function in the world, we have to have an identity. You are a brilliant podcaster. I'm the filmmaker, writer. Those are our identities. And at root, there is nothing that is an Anton, and there is nothing that is a Frederick. All that we really are at our fundamental, deepest level is a field of awareness. That's it. We're a field of awareness. We have all our five senses, and we have our thinking brain and our emotional brain. And so, sensations, feelings, thoughts, they all come and go. And all we really can do is be aware of them as much as we possibly can. And then skillfully choose how to interact with them. And that's it. And the more we hold so tightly to our, I'm Anton and I believe this, and I'm Frederick and I believe, the more, frankly, we suffer. We suffer and we cause suffering, right? Because that's, again, where all the isms come from, right?
Yeah.
That's where the idea of the other comes from. It's a fabrication. It's a mental illusion.
So a question, if I may, of yours, because I understand that Buddhist idea of not having any beliefs, and at the same time we live in a culture that is completely, literally baked into its existence, the idea of beliefs. To be an entrepreneur, to be essentially like almost any job in our society or any leadership position in our Western society is, from my perspective at least, seems to revolve around this idea of the person with the best beliefs wins. The person who can sell a belief the most efficient way wins. especially YouTube, social media, I see it all the time and I fall prey to it constantly, is this like, what is the Anton Czachor podcast? Who is Anton Czachor without my, like, what is a niche? What is a brand? It's a belief. It is a distillation of existence into three things that you're going to not sell somebody, but you're going to dedicate your brand to. You're going to say, and every time you come and tune into me, we're going to talk about trauma, healing, and the universe. And it's like, it is extremely difficult to break free from that by the very nature of the society we're in. So I'm curious with you.
Totally.
How do you reconcile this understanding, or I don't even know what to call it because we can't call it a.
Yeah. I don't. I fail.
Yeah.
I fail.
Thank you for being honest.
My heart goes out to you, brother, because I get it. In this society, you have to build your brand. Everybody needs to know. I'm going to check out Anton and I'll get this, Well, I'll tell you, I had a conversation in LA with a Hollywood agent in 1995, and he's looking at my body of work and he's going, Frederick, how do I sell you? Who the hell are you? You do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. I can't sell you. There's no brand.
I can't sell you.
I can't sell you, right? And that dovetails exactly with what you're saying, right? Everybody, talk about a belief system. I've never seen a more successful belief system than the one that we live in today under capitalism. And that is basically consumerism is our culture, right? And people actually believe that the more that they accumulate stuff, the happier they'll be, right? Because that's what society tells us every day. Even if we have pain, right? Well, just reach for this drug and that'll take care of it. There's always something we have to buy. That's something outside of ourselves. And that is the biggest lie that's ever been sold to the human race. Nothing is outside of ourselves that is going to, everything is right here. It's right here, right now. We don't have to go anywhere and look for it. But we also don't have to buy into that notion of consumption, because that's destroying the planet and it's destroying our relationships with other people. I don't know. I could go on for a while.
Yeah. Hey, man. And by the way, and like what you just said, feel free to, like, if you have an idea and you really want to go into it, feel free to talk for like 20 minutes. Like, and I know, and I'm serious, because I've actually like kind of observed you in this conversation, and I don't know if this is true or not. This could just be my projection, but I feel it's almost like you'll be going, and then like you almost like rein yourself in. I do. Yeah, because I feel like I don't want to just listen to myself for like the next half hour. Partly because I've learned that the more that I'm speaking, I'm not learning. And that's why I love my work, because I get to listen to other people. I'm not listening to myself. So that is part of it. And partly it's just a pragmatic thing. It's like, I don't want to just like riff for 20 minutes on your show. You might have a dozen other agendas, and I don't want to upend those agendas, Yeah, I do. And I think like my biggest thing with that is I just see the stress it causes people. I can almost feel what it feels like to rein yourself in, because it's almost like, if it is a natural ending, like, I'm just kind of done talking, that'd be one thing. But, I've done this. I see it all the time. Like, it's almost this like shame. It's like, stop talking. Like, rein yourself in. And I can feel the energy shift. I can feel like you're on, you're just flowing. And then there's like this abrupt energetic shift, and like, you just cut your energy off. And then I can almost feel the shift. And then you just close down and you get ready for the ending. And it's just like seeing that in you. I'm just like, wow. it's so human. Like we all do that. We're all taught like, oh, don't talk too much. And it's like, and it's like, it's true. It's like everything you just said, pragmatically, it's probably best to listen, and we learn more when we listen. But at the same time, I just see like, if we're censoring our self-expression unnaturally, because that's why I almost see it like censoring is like, we're unnaturally censoring ourselves.
Welcome to my critic. That's my self-critic.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very observant what you're saying, and I think it's absolutely true. So
wow.
so that's my self-critic.
That's beautiful, and thank you for being vulnerable enough to own that, and that's something that I very much value and love about you. Is I feel like I'm like, all right, like Frederick at his best will be honest with me. If I ask a question, Frederick will do his best to be vulnerable, and I very much value that. And yeah, man, I just feel how painful that is. That because it's all from shame. It's all that internal talk. Go on.
It's definitely part of it, and there's no question. Yeah. But about the vulnerability thing, though, to me, my number one strategy for reminding myself that this whole Frederick Marx ego construction is a complete illusion is by being transparent, by not being invested in my self-critic and hiding them away, or saying, oh no, I'm not feeling shame right now.
Yeah, the bullshit.
It's all bullshit, right? And because there is nothing lasting and eternal anyway about Frederick Marx. So it's very freeing. It's just very freeing, and I want to live freely. And it makes me happy too. So why not?
Yeah, let's just love each other, dude. It's like
and not be defensive. It always saddens me to see myself get defensive or to get other people to be defensive. It's like, dude, just accept it. Who gives a shit? Okay, you get angry now and then. You snap at people. Okay, fuck it. We all do. Let's move on. Don't get defensive about it. I'm not talking about you, obviously. But
I know.
Yeah.
Hey, dude, I'm right with you, man. And this is a very good place to start the ending of the podcast, and just So I just want to sit in this with for a moment with you, and just be like, I feel that, and I love you. I appreciate you.
I love you too.
Like, you don't need to be anything for me. And it's like, just know that, like I said at the beginning, I didn't bring you on because of your achievements. I didn't bring you on because of your accomplishments. I didn't bring you on because you're going to say some really interesting things. I didn't bring you on because I wanted you to present something or... Oh,
I brought you on so you'd cut yourself off, and we could have a good discussion about why you're cutting yourself off.
Well, this feels like, sometimes I wish we had another hour and a half, and we'll do this in another podcast, but I feel like in some sense, like the true podcast began right now. It's like this moment of like breaking the facade. Because,
I told you, I did a podcast with a friend of mine a month ago. All I talked about was my shadows.
That's beautiful.
It was like half the conversation. I'm talking about, I got a scarcity shadow, so it makes me really cheap sometimes. I'm like, no, I don't know if I want to tip, 20%. I'll give her 15%. Stuff like that. I mean, I went on for like 10 minutes talking about my shadows. So,
and do you think that's okay?
To talk about it or to have them?
Both.
Well, to have them is just natural. It's just human. Right? Everybody's got their shadows. So these are mine. it's kind of like it's the fashion, the clothes that I wear. I'll have like bright Hawaiian shirts, whereas somebody else might have, subdued, solid color shirts. Okay, it's my style. But again, as long as I'm not in any way invested or ashamed about it, no, it's just real. That's all. It's just real, and it is what it is. And the more I can out myself, again, the freer I am.
Yeah. Like, do you think, to yourself, your own critic, do you allow yourself in love to speak for 10 minutes about yourself, maybe even 20?
Well, that's a long time. But to do it in shorter bursts, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've certainly learned, to bless myself and to love myself, but I will say that still remains the final threshold for me. The final threshold for me in human growth in this lifetime is to love and appreciate and acknowledge myself as much as I do other people.
Yeah.
And frankly, I would argue that that's true for most people. That a lot of us are much easier. We can love our friends deeply, but can we be a friend to ourselves and love ourselves that deeply as we would our friends? Typically, no. And actually, this is actually one of the subjects of one of my 5 veterans films. They do this exercise, a group of these 22 women vets. And that was one of the hardest things they did in this whole workshop, man, was to turn that love to themselves. There were some women who said, fuck this. I can't do, I'm out of here, basically, is what women said.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. How sad is that, right?
Wow, man. That, hey, man, I've been there too. And even in this conversation, all my podcasts, there's always a part of me that also is like, be concise. Say that, did you say that well? And so it's like, yeah, you're not alone, man. Like I got that too. It's like I practice in every podcast and every video I make. It's just like, hey man, you're allowed to talk, because for the first, like I've done 100 and this is the 117th podcast I've done.
Wow. Beautiful.
Yeah. In the first 90, I didn't really allow myself to talk. I would shame myself for talking too much or whatever. And I remember finishing podcasts and being so fucking drained, dude. I was angry. I was frustrated. I'd have a great podcast, but I'd finish and I'd be like, why am I so frustrated? Why am I so angry right now? I'd have to go for an hour walk because I was just so angry. And I realized that I was angry at myself for censoring myself. I was angry at myself for being angry at myself for censoring myself. Like it was that whole thing. And I remember a friend of mine just said, dude, you're allowed to talk, man. Like you're allowed to share yourself on your podcast too. Because I had this idea, again, from my father growing up that like, oh, you're arrogant. You talk too much. You talk about yourself too much. You're selfish. Growing up, I was constantly told I was selfish. I was constantly told I was arrogant. And so I had this complex in me still. Don't be arrogant. Don't be arrogant. Don't be selfish. And it's like, it literally causes me to be unable to connect with people. Because I'm sitting here trying to have a conversation with Frederick, but really having a conversation with myself, beating myself up and making sure I'm not selfish. And when I'm beating myself up in my head, I'm not actually open-hearted with you. I'm not connecting with you. I'm listening to you and having a side conversation. And I've got a lot better at this, but occasionally it still comes up where I have to remind myself like, hey, and it's like, in some sense, pointing that out in you and helping you and being warm with you, being like, hey, man, it's okay. I'm really telling that to myself, because if I tell you it's okay to talk, I'm really telling myself, and it's okay for you too, man. Because
that's how projection works, right? Spot it, you got it, we say in our work, right? So you spotted it in me and you got it. But yeah, that's well, and I have an arrogant shadow. There's just no question about it.
Yeah.
I have very little patience for a lot of the niggling details of life. And you get me on the phone with a cable vision clerk. It's like, oh my God, I want to kill myself. You know,
Yeah.
uh, so that's that's yet another of my many shadows. And you know what? Sometimes that line gets a little gray between,
Yeah.
well, what is arrogance? I'm talking here for 15 minutes versus, what is actually living my mission.
Yeah.
That's
Dude.
why we need other people, to just keep reflecting back to us what they have for us.
Yeah.
And, it's really important that we have that input. And sometimes it can be brutal.
Yeah.
It's like, Frederick, you fucking like owned the floor for half an hour. You didn't give room for anybody. I'm like, okay, well, I need to hear that. And then if I hear the same thing from two people, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
well, now maybe I really need to. And if it's three or more, you better believe that I'm like, okay, this is input I've got to take in and consider. If it's just
Mm.
one person, right, it can be a crank.
Yeah.
It can just be their shit and just their projections, and who knows. But the more people it becomes, the more likely it is that there's some truth in that.
Amen, brother. Well, this was some beautiful medicine at the end of the podcast. This was honestly, this is my favorite part of the whole conversation. Last 15 minutes, like getting to the real stuff. I was like, yes, something vulnerable and real. And this now is shameless plug time. So now, if you want to share with me and the audience anything you're working on, where people can find you, go nuts, have some fun.
Well, thank you. Well, my website is warriorfilms.org, and you'll find an awful lot there. And typically, we give away my talks, my blogs, my short films, and we do try to monetize my long films. I have a new 5-film series on veterans that's out there. It's all about healing and transformation. You can buy them off the site along with some of the other films. You can find my 2 books, soon to be 3 books, there on the site. And perhaps most importantly, please just sign up and join our extended family. Just give us your name and email. I send out newsletters about once a month. I always make them full of good news and humor, because I like to laugh. So I put in funny stuff all the time. And of course, you can always easily unsubscribe too if you want. So, that's essential, right? So, yeah, I think that's. Oh, and one last thing. In my next film is going to be about life honoring celebrations. And it's a part of a side mission of mine that nobody leaves this planet without having a ceremony where they get to experience firsthand all of their extended family, friends, and colleagues who they impacted positively in their lives, and get that feedback from them, from people looking in their eyes saying, I love you, and here's what you did to make me a better person. And then for me personally, I believe that nobody deserves to leave this lifetime with anything less. We want to experience some of the ripples of impact and change that we've made in our lives. We all deserve that. So the working title of this film is It's Your Wonderful Life. So that's a journey that I really welcome any of you to join us on. And if you actually are dying yourself, or somebody who's dying, then please reach out, because I'm looking for stories right now to film. And we want young people and middle-aged people, and not just the elderly. We want people of all ages, because death finds us at all ages. So please, sign up, join us, and become part of our community.
Beautiful. And one thing I can absolutely vouch for all of Frederick's work, because I'm about halfway through your Rites of a Good Life book. I've viewed, I think, all of your documentaries, and I want to say like they're really good, but that doesn't mean anything. But what I can say is I think I actually cried in every single one of your works. I cried in Hoop Dreams. I cried in the Veteran one. I cried in the Journey to Sanskar. I cried in your book, and it's like that. Like I don't say things that are like good or bad anymore. I just say, did I cry or not? Did I feel something enough to have an overwhelming emotional response? And if I'm correct, every single one of your works I have. So that is my biggest, I can confidently tell anyone.
From you?
Absolutely, man.
I cried in every single one of your films. That's great. I might put it on my site.
No, absolutely, man. I'll even give you this video version if you want a video version of it too. But this was an absolute pleasure, Frederick. So thank you for coming on, and hopefully everybody who's watching, you all enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next one. I love you. Bye. Thanks for tuning into the show today, everybody. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to check out more like it, click right here. Also, be sure to let me know in the comment section below what you enjoyed most about this episode and what you want to see more of in the future. And that's it. So I'll see you all in the next episode. I love you. Bye.